Okay, well, thank you for joining us again today. A lot of you have maybe been coming to my programs from Baxter Patrick Library with Drawing with Mr. Toby. And today is not necessarily a drawing program, but is definitely going to hint on those things because today is a very special day. Today, we are going to be graced with a New York Times best-selling author. We are going to be graced with someone who has won a Reuben Award, which is an amazing award that's just like the Oscars of comics. Takes years and years of solid dedication to even be considered for that award. And today, Terry Liebenson, the author of the Emmy and Friends series and the newest edition, which is Becoming Brianna, has graced us with her presence and is going to be here to answer some questions. And we even have Geneva, one of my regular patrons at Baxter Patrick, that will also be asking some questions. So, everybody, Terry Liebenson.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you agreeing. I know that everything is crazy right now. So for the audience to know, I've been at this library for about a year, and I actually got to meet Terry. What's that been, a year and a half ago?
That sounds about right. Yeah, maybe 2018, was it?
Somewhere in there, I got this crazy phone call one day that was just like, "Hey, is your story time open in like three story time room open in like 3 days?" And I was like, "I think so. What's up?" And it was a manager from Books a Million. And the next thing I know, I have a New York Times bestselling author standing in front of me, and when I first saw it, I don't even know if I'd read one of your books yet. And then I did and became completely obsessed with it. Uh, and now all of my coworkers are obsessed with all of your books and has been just really, really wonderful.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for reading those and immersing yourself in my nutty world.
Well, so more than anything, we have to definitely talk about a little bit without any spoilers, of course, Becoming Brianna, which is the newest edition. I know that just like with just Jamie and other aspects within the Emmy and Friends, a lot of these plot lines come from your life, from the life of the people that mean something to you. Um, where does Becoming Brianna come from?
Brianna definitely comes from I've taken aspects of my own life, my daughter's lives, definitely. Um, it's I think it's okay and safe to say now that the book is about a bat mitzvah. So it's a little bit more unusual, a little bit more niche, but I definitely made the book universal enough so that anybody can read it, and that was my goal. But because the characters in Emmy and Friends are at the right age 13, it just this just kind of to me just fell in my lap. I come from a Jewish background. My whole family has been through the bat or bar mitzvah process, bat for girls, bar for boys, and it's just ripe with material. Lots of fun, lots of crazy stuff that surrounds this whole event. And you can it's just the drama and the challenges and the funny pretty much just kind of write themselves. I've definitely taken some of our own experiences as well as just added, made up stuff or other things I've researched or heard. I can tell you that the mom who becomes what I call a Botzilla, which is actually the name of another book I have that had to do with my comic strip. That is definitely my own experience as a mom dealing with bat mitzvah process. So you tend to go a little nuts. You become like a bridezilla.
I can definitely tell you if it makes you feel any better. With me being from Texas and my brother's wife is first generation American. Her parents are from southern Mexico, and when their daughter, it came time for her quinceañera, which has some similarities. And it was that year going into that quinceañera. And then I hear about the bat mitzvah and Badzilla. And I was like, this is a cultural aspect that I think so many mothers could definitely identify with, whether it be a sweet 16 birthday party, a bat mitzvah, a quinceañera. I think that these things really show how literature can unite cultures.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like I said, it can be very universal stuff and just really funny stuff. And of course I had to inject a lot of, I wanted it to be more than that though. I also wanted it to, be about Bree really discovering herself and thinking about what she really believes in, and this includes how she views her faith, because she's actually half Jewish and she wasn't brought up religiously at all, and she's not sure she really believes in why she's having a bat mitzvah. So she's questioning it along the way, and that's her nature anyway. She's a questioner. She's very inquisitive and very curious, and so she's doing a lot of soul searching in the book. So it's a lot of soul searching tempered with a lot of humor and hopefully a lot of heart, and hopefully a lot of kids are enjoying it, and maybe parents too if they want to steal their kids' books.
I think so. I can say from experience, just within the branch of my library, that although everyone is definitely loving Just Jamie and become an Invisible Emmy, but the connection that a lot of my adult coworkers are making with Becoming Brianna, I can definitely see how any child would definitely love this book, but I'm seeing connections made with adults. And so if there are adults watching this, please, I hate calling children's books. They're just books. They're wonderful. Read these and you will walk away with having felt that you've just read a wonderful book. And it just because it has kids in it doesn't mean it's only for kids.
Well, thank you.
Hey, you wrote it. I just read them and I just sling them. That's my job. You do the hard part. But with all of your books and with me seeing these connections that are made, and as these characters just really do come alive, your ability to create characters that come off the page and leave an emotional connection with the reader is just unreal. And I think that you definitely honed that during the 14 years of Pajama Diaries, of creating these wonderful characters that you feel like they're real. And I think a lot of that, I'm guessing, probably comes from a lot of truth to your characters. Just like in Just Jamie, when you told us about how there's a bit of the truth in the plot line with some events that happened with your daughter. I've always wondered how with your daughter knowing that kind of her life has kind of been put out there a little bit. Has there been any long-term repercussions from that?
No, not at all. She's in college now. This event happened in 8th grade, and she's given me full permission to use it. And actually, with Just Jamie, it was really just very, very loosely based on what happened to her. The poor thing, she was essentially dumped through a group text message by her friend group. And it was devastating, and this was the icing on the cake though. The next day, this happened at night, and the next day our family had to drive 20 hours to Florida for our spring break. Yes, we drove.
And she just had to sit and think about that for 20 hours.
Right. So yeah, the morning after she got dumped by all her friends. And by the way, they told her every reason why they didn't want to be friends with her anymore.
Oh.
So about as brutal as you can get. And I have to say, she was a complete trooper. That whole trip, she tried to put it out of her mind. I mean, she would cry every so often, and then she'd kind of get over it.
I just call that first thing morning.
Yeah. So it's been a long time since then, and I have to say, like, right after that incident, when we got back after her spring break, her old friends from her elementary school thought what happened to her was awful, and they just kind of like took her back in under their wing, and she stayed friends with them, and then she found new friends. She went to high school the next year, and she was fine after that. She's got a wonderful set of friends and that have stayed with her. And so there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel for all this. I think we can safely say that most of us have survived the middle school years and beyond, but some more intact than others, but for the most part, we get through it. I think I blocked all those years out myself, to be quite honest.
Me too.
Mine was a little different. Yeah. Mine was a little different. And actually my younger daughter, she went completely unscathed. She was fine. She actually had a pretty nice time all throughout middle school. But with me, I just noticed that my friendships kept coming and going. It's almost like you're trying on new friendships and sort of discarding them, and people are doing the same thing to you a lot. It's just, you're growing up, you're trying to figure out who your tribe is, and it's hard. It's a really tough transitional time. So, and I'm guessing that really hasn't changed through the years. It's definitely, I felt like when my daughters went through it, it repeated what I went through. Just now we have social media. That's the biggest difference. So
I guess Geneva can probably give us some insight to see if anything's changed from when we were in junior high.
Right.
There's definitely a lot more going on social media, I think. And I feel like that's kind of taken a new sort of turn as far as all the relationships that everybody has with each other.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that it can be a lot tougher with social media because things are just on display more. Is that right?
Yeah, people definitely feel a lot more comfortable saying things about other people, even if they're not nice things, and they can kind of get away with it, to be honest.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully there's some good too that comes out of social media. I mean, at least, you're more in touch with your friends, you're more available to each other. It's a little bit easier in certain ways. There's probably lots of positives and negatives. And is that your cat? I love it.
That is a cat.
Aww.
You have to tell us the cat's name, Geneva. You can't just leave us hanging on this.
His name is Little Guy.
Little Guy? Well, Little Guy's back there making biscuits. Perfect. Well, so Terry, when I'm like book talking your books, whether a lot of times when I'm talking to parents, because often I'm in a library setting, so I'm with parents and children at the same time. The way that I, of course, interpret your books is that it sets up a world to help the reader see that as kids are going through junior high and they're experiencing things, oftentimes, whether it's positive or negative, these are the most extreme emotions that they've ever felt just because of youth. And so they react accordingly. If something bad happens to them, that could be the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their life. From an adult's perspective, it's not that big of a deal. But from their perspective, because it is the worst thing in their life, they react as if this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them, because that's the truth. And I find through reading your books that gives me a sense of patience, that gives me a sense of empathy and understanding, especially with kids in that junior high age group, so that when, as an adult, I'm just like, why are you overreacting? And then after reading your book, I say, oh my goodness, come here. Because I now see that they're reacting completely appropriately. They're reacting as if this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them, because it is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. Did I get this right?
I think I think that was absolutely right on track. Yeah, it's so true. And what I try and do in these books is instead of creating a horrible, horrific tragedy that's very specific, that can happen to a character, I'm actually trying to find like these sort of, I wouldn't call them little events, but more like events that are universal and feel monumental to kids at that time in their lives. Because yes, as you said, of course, they are huge and monumental at the time, and they're the biggest things that can happen to a person. And honestly, being dumped by your friends is horrible at any age.
At any age.
And but you're going to feel it so much more, I think, at this age, because it almost feels like there's a spotlight on you and everybody's watching. And that's not true, of course, but that's how it feels. It feels like at this time in your life, there's always a spotlight on you. and sometimes you're just trying to blend in. And, other times you do kind of want to stand out, but not for any kind of bad reason. So and I think even adults feel that, but maybe not to the same extent. It's and you of course learn from these kind of things that happen. I think, Toby, I talked to you about what happened to me when I was in 5th grade, I believe, and that's actually what helped me develop the story of Invisible Emmy, where my best friend and I were writing. We were bored after school, and we decided to write really disgusting, funny, mushy love notes to I wouldn't even call them, they weren't our crushes, they were just like the 2 most popular boys in our grade, and I don't even think we really liked them or anything, but there they were, and so we just thought it would be funny to do that, and that's what we did. And we, of course, signed our names because we were stupid. And then my best friend decided to go drop those notes off at their houses, just mine, not hers. And because she thought that's what I wanted her to do. I don't know where she got that from, but that's what she did.
5th grade logic.
Of course, the next day when I went to school, and I have no idea why I didn't play sick the next day, but I faced the music. I went to school, and the entire class had seen those notes by then because those boys showed them.
Oh my God. I cannot even imagine.
Yeah, this is what I dealt with that entire day, and it was just about as horrible as you can imagine. I was completely embarrassed and humiliated. But here's the thing. The day after that, nothing. Everyone forgot about it.
Squirrel. Squirrel.
And it gave me great material years later. And now I'm Facebook friends with those 2 boys, so we're all good.
Awesome. Well, and it's, as you bring up, you try to find these issues that have a universality to them. With that being said, how do you respond when people view your books as being girl books?
Oh, well, I don't like to label them as such. Most of them, I'm saying most of them star girls, but actually the one I'm writing now, I'm writing the 5th book, and it's actually about a boy this time. I'm not going to reveal anything else.
Oh, you can't do this to us.
It's about one of the boys, one of the pre-existing boys in this world, and a girl too. It's about 2 people, but mainly about the boy. And but I like to say, girls read plenty of books about boys. Why can't boys read plenty of books about girls? I think it just expands your horizons and gives you great insight, and really nothing should be gendered. I don't think it's, I think that's a thing of the past. And I like to think that my books are fun and funny enough, and have good stories, and feature, you know, three-dimensional type of main characters that anybody can relate to and read about. So yeah, that's my stance on it. I think anyone should read these books.
And I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's an interview, it's a loaded question. I find that in a library, that when a child is turned away from a book that has a lead character that is a different gender than themselves, and they turn away from it, I have to recognize that that's a learned reaction, and that then I will speak with their parents and show them, you know, Invisible Emmy, and there's like, well, that's a girl's book, and I'm just like, that was a learned behavior. And then, as with the last time that we saw each other and the family that came in, the little boys were just like, that's a girl's book. And then 2 days later, the mother sends me a picture with young Ezekiel on a couch, curled up, with the most recent copy of Just Jamie.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
You put these
books. That was a great moment.
Yes, it was a wonderful moment. I loved it, and it showed everything that you and I believe and that we see. And that, so hopefully, if there's parents watching this, just to remember, books are books. The stories are stories. It doesn't matter, and that those are learned behaviors. So you definitely answered my next question, which was, when are we going to get a book with a boy character? Because you kind of did give me a hint last time we met, so I kind of had to bring it up. But the one thing that I do want to definitely ask, because I as you know, an adult, and we think about professions and things, when I heard that you had retired Pajama Diaries. So kids, if you're watching this, Miss Liebesen had a wonderful, incredibly long-running newspaper comic book strip, and that's where she won the Reuben Award. It was called Pajama Diaries. It was amazing, that aged characters, and I got to see cartoon characters get old and are older, and it was a wonderful idea that was very unique, and you have retired that. How do you come to an end after 14 incredibly successful years? How do you draw that last cell?
How did I draw the last? It was hard. Although honestly, it wasn't that hard because I was so freaking busy that I didn't really have as much time to think about it as I should have. I kind of mourned it later, but yeah, the reason why I retired it was simply because the book series was taking over, and I was offered to do this. I had this incredible opportunity to do what I kind of call an in-between book, which it's called Uniquely You. It actually comes out soon. It comes out, I think, September 29th. Mm-hmm. And it's a cross between an activity book and a guided journal. And in order to make this book, I had to give up the comic strip. There was really no other way. But I gladly did it. I was feeling like Pajama Diaries for me was kind of coming to a close anyway. I just wasn't feeling it quite as much as I used to. So this was kind of the push that I needed. I was going to end it at the 15-year mark, but I actually ended it a little before the 14-year mark. So just about a little over a year sooner than I wanted to, but I was really pretty much going to end it anyway. So yeah, that was bittersweet, but the journal came to be something I really loved doing. It was probably the most fun project I've ever done in my life. I hope you guys buy it. It's coming out in time for the holidays. You can buy that.
I've already pre-ordered. I've had my pre-order since the beginning of July.
Awesome. And I'm telling you, grown-ups are going to want to see this book too. It's so much fun. It's like, if only we were still flying on planes. It's a great airplane book just to fill out. But, or a good car trip book. So there you go, if you don't get car sick. But anyway, so yeah, going back to the comic strip, yeah, it was bittersweet, but also kind of a relief for me. And honestly, I haven't had, it's kind of a relief not to have the daily deadlines anymore now. Just so busy. So yeah.
Well, great. So, well, Geneva. So as I'd mentioned, Geneva is one of my young patrons from my library that was definitely a fan. And she agreed to come up with some of her own questions after having read these books. And so now I'm going to turn this over to the real professional in the room, which is Geneva. Do you have any questions for Terry?
Yes. I wanted to know, when you build up to a big plot twist in your books, how do you think of all the details to add in so it makes sense in the end?
That's a great question, Geneva. And thanks for being on, by the way. I meant to get that in beforehand. So the plot twists, yeah, there are two, I would say probably in my first two books are the biggest plot twists. The kind of the twist endings, as I call them. And they kind of came to me in different ways. So I worked on them in different ways. So with Invisible Emmy, I wrote it so much differently than all my other books. First of all, it was before I had a publisher and an editor. I was just writing to see if it would work, if I could do something like that. And so the way I did it, I just kind of like freewheeled it. I just wrote and see where it would take me. So I didn't even have like an outline or any kind of story in my mind. I just started with a character, and that character was me when I was younger, when I was aged like 11, 12, 13. I was super shy and very artistic. That's how I expressed myself the best. And so I wrote from her voice, and really it just started by being Emmy. I didn't have the other character Katie in it. I just wrote it sort of as an illustrated story, so kind of like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, that type, where you have a lot of text and then spot art. And then just luckily as I wrote it, I started getting ideas and a storyline. And then I thought I needed some kind of embarrassing incident for her. And that's when that note thing came back to me. It was very useful. And so a little bit later on, I thought, what if the story was told from the perspective of two different characters? Because you have this one embarrassing event that happened, but what if you had two different people looking at it from two different angles? And that's when the sort of her opposite character, Katie, came about. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with her, but then I figured out sort of that twist ending, and I don't want to give it away or anything, but it came to me after I developed Katie. And then I kind of worked backwards from there. I'm like, well, how would this work? I have to kind of go back to the chapters and see how I'd work her in and to make that whole plot twist work. And the way I did that, it kind of helped me figure out how I would do the plot twist for the next book for, what was the next one? Positively Izzy.
You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point. So with Positively Izzy, I kind of knew the plot twist more from the beginning, and I just sort of worked backwards in that sense, just for that twist ending part. So I knew how that was going to play out. Sometimes it helps to work backwards. But then with my other books, I've actually been working more forwards. They don't have the big twist endings. Although I'd like to get back into that again, so we'll see. I'm not sure if it's going to work out for book 5, but I have other ideas for maybe
Hopefully
6, 7. We'll see.
Hopefully the twist in book 5 is no more spitting kids.
What's that? I'm sorry.
No
more spitting kids.
Oh, no more.
That's just one of my, I don't understand when kids develop that habit of spitting all the time, and when you added that character in, and I connected with it because I see it, and I'm just like, no, quit that.
Yeah, I don't even know where that came from, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, it's a horrible habit, kids. Don't start.
I'll do it.
Geneva, do you have any more questions?
Was the character Celia from the 3rd book always in the back of your mind since you started the series, or was she a more recent creation?
Celia was definitely more recent. I didn't think of her until I wrote Just Jamie. I needed more of a, kind of that mean girl character. I don't like to say mean girl. I like to say girls with issues or something. It just, a lot of them outgrow it, thankfully. But yeah, I needed sort of the that character who's an instigator, and that's when she came about. But I kind of grew to like her a little bit, and in a few special editions of Just Jamie, I actually included a bonus chapter where one of the chapters was told from Celia's point of view, which was a lot of fun to do. And I'm kind of including her in the book I'm writing now, too, just sort of as a side character. But she kind of keeps the plot going a little bit. She's kind of fun. Yeah.
Wonderful.
You have any other questions?
And are there any, or what are some of the main authors that that kind of inspired your career?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I was inspired more by cartoonists, I think, than authors. I mean, I've always loved books, but I really loved reading comics growing up. Oh my gosh, if graphic novels like these were around, or illustrated novels were around when I was your age, I wouldn't have left my room. I would have been reading and just devouring those things all the time. So I'm loving this explosion of these types of books. But anyway, so growing up, I'd say my first big influence was Charles Schulz, who did the comic strip Peanuts, Charlie Brown, Snoopy, those guys. He was a huge influence on most cartoonists about my age anyway, that I know of. And later on, it kind of expanded to other cartoonists. As I got older, I really I loved a comic strip called Bloom County, done by Burke Breathed. I really got into an underground famous comic artist named Linda Berry when I was a little older in college, and I kind of worshipped her. I still do, actually. And she actually just won the Reuben Award for Cartoonist of the Year. I was up against her for that. On Saturday, I lost, but I was so thrilled. I was so thrilled that she got it. She was, you go up against your hero. It's okay. So that was really neat. And yeah, a lot of other cartoonists. I used to, my poor brother, when I was growing up, he had this huge collection of different cartoon anthologies and comic books and Mad Magazine and Archie comics, and I would sneak into his room and sneak them out of his room and read them. And I used to actually kind of vandalize them. I would draw over the Archie comics and I'd insert my own dialogue, and I don't know. He was such a nice guy. If he was mad, he didn't really show it, luckily, or he was just too busy, but he was a lot older than me. But anyway, those are my early influences. So yeah. Whew,
Kids, if you want comic books that have blank voice clouds, come talk to me. Do not draw over my comic books.
Yeah, I don't advise that.
At least not the library.
Make your own. I did start making my own. I started drawing my own comics a little bit later, so it's all good.
And was it difficult for you to go from writing comics to a whole novel?
That's a great question too. You've got really good questions. It was different. It was definitely different. I would say it continues to be harder for me because I am used to writing in short form. I'm used to just, making a joke or a short story or part of a short story just in 3 or 4 panels, or maybe a little more for a Sunday strip. So yeah, it can be a hurdle. But sometimes these books they kind of flow out of me. Sometimes they don't. Book 5 that I'm working on now, because I am writing from a boy's point of view, it's been a real challenge for me. It's been really hard. I've already rewritten it. I'm on my 3rd rewriting, basically. It's been both fun and brutal. and when you're trying to build up a plot and build tension and conflict and everything, it can be challenging, but it can also be great too. It really, like, it helps keep my mind sharp. It keeps me thinking all the time. And it's kind of like solving a puzzle. So if you like doing those, it can be a lot of fun.
It's awesome. I know that when I do my drawing programs, that I'm constantly telling the kids, these drawings yes, we're doing a quick drawing that looks great today, but I will often show the sketches that I worked on for days leading up to the program to show this doesn't just happen. I mean, even the great Bob Ross, when he would, paint an entire painting in 27 minutes, every show, 3 paintings. He painted the exact same painting 3 times. The first time to get it all worked out, the second time during the show, and the third time as the final, and that was the picture that they used at the end. And so, yeah, it takes rewrites and edits, and so kids, this is a New York Times best-selling author, and obviously when you do it, it doesn't come out perfect the first time.
No, absolutely not. Those pretty little trees don't paint themselves, and
they do not. I actually just got back from 1 week of Bob Ross school, and those happy little trees can be very frustrating.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work, and what I tell kids when they ask too is, a lot of it is rework, is editing. I actually, weirdly enough, I kind of like doing the reworks and the editing. I don't know what it is, but I think it's because I'm just such a perfectionist, and I like all that little busy work and just trying to correct things. I'm weird, but it's really helpful. And my editor is just amazing. Like she for instance, if I've written a manuscript, that's basically the first draft of a book, or the first draft of a book. If I've written the first draft of a book, sometimes you write it and you're so close to it, you just don't really see it properly. You don't see any kind of errors or anything that's not quite working. And she will pick up on that, and then all of a sudden it's glaringly obvious when you read her notes. And oh yeah, she gives me all these aha moments, which is great. And it really clears things up. So having a great editor is really helpful. And for anyone who doesn't have an editor, and that means a lot of students or anyone who's trying to write a book, an editor just means showing it to someone you know, like to a friend or a family member or anyone you trust, who will give you an honest critique of it. So I show my husband. Yeah, right. There you go. You, Toby.
Well, wonderful.